Hi friends, my name is Kayla Rain, and today I'm going to be filming my wrap-up for the month of March, where I read a total of 8 things. So March held my first not-so-great read of the year, but even that couldn't squash the other amazing things that I read, so I'm super excited to share the amazing, incredible things that I read, and that one not-so-great thing that I'm going to have to discuss some problematic things with, so buckle up. So the first book that I finished in the month of March was The Brightest Night by T. Sutherland. This is the middle point to the Wings of Fire series, but honestly, to me, it feels like it could be the end of the series. Like if you wanted to leave off there, it ties up that storyline, it ties up those viewpoints from those characters that you've been following in the first 4 books. And I feel like you could reasonably leave off there and not have to wonder about a lot of things. I'm definitely going to continue on because I loved this series, but if you feel like taking on a 10-book series is just a daunting task, keep in mind that you could easily cut it off at 5 and then revisit the rest of that series later on, and you're not going to be left on a cliffhanger wondering what's happening, where the characters are they safe, are they all alive, what has happened, all that stuff. I feel like it ended off on a really great note. Without giving too much away, this book follows Sunny. She is the Sandwing Dragonette, and I really enjoyed her viewpoint. She is just a scrappy little nobody, basically, so she has something to prove. People don't take her, not people, dragons. Dragons don't take her seriously, and she feels like she has to kind of prove that she can be tough, she can get things done, and she's not just this tiny little dragonette that needs to be protected. And I absolutely loved this conclusion or midpoint to the series. I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I picked up was Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo, and I get it. I totally get the hype and the adoration for this duology just from reading that first book. So this is a high fantasy series set in the Grishaverse. I will be honest, I haven't read the Grisha trilogy, so I will say the first couple of chapters in this book were a little bit confusing, but I found that everything kind of smoothed out pretty well and I understood what was going on. You know, not even before I hit like the 25% mark in the book. So if you haven't read the Grisha trilogy, I will go ahead and say the first couple of chapters are going to be like, wait, what's going on? What are these words they're using? But you'll catch on fairly quickly, I promise. This was amazing. I absolutely love the characters in this novel. I love the story. I love the pacing. I love the world. It was amazing. I get it. I get the obsession. And honestly, I enjoyed this so much that I am reconsidering maybe picking up the Grisha trilogy because I just really enjoyed Leigh Bardugo's writing style and her characters. And I kind of want more of this world now because I'm a little bit obsessed. I ended up giving this a 5 out of 5 stars. Because it's freaking amazing and I loved it. The next book that I picked up was actually an audiobook, and that was When the Moon Was Ours by Anna Marie McLemore. And I originally started to read this in the physical book form, but I was having a little bit of a difficulty kind of tying everything together. And there's just something about magical realism that doesn't click very well for me unless I listen to it on audiobook. I don't know why, but audiobooks work out really well for me with that. So this was an absolutely beautiful, stunningly put together magical realism novel. It follows 2 main characters and it's just very whimsical. It had some practical magic vibes to me because there's like some magic and everyone's really afraid of it and they're just like, oh, we kind of have to keep it at a distance, but I guess it's not too much of a problem as long as it's beneficial for us. Anyway, this was just an absolutely beautiful, stunning novel. I really loved the love story that was in it. It was put together really well. And there's this really fantastic love story between the 2 main characters, and it was really beautiful to see that grow from childhood into their teen years, and you do get to see that back and forth, which I really enjoyed. As far as representation in this book, I haven't heard bad things about the trans rep, and I definitely want to read more Own Voices reviews, but as far as I could tell, it seemed like things were done very respectfully. Overall, I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars, and I do recommend the audiobook. The narrator was fantastic. The next book that I read was actually a picture book, but it was a really long picture book, and that was Josephine by Patricia Hruby Powell. And this was just a really lovely little children's book, and it had some words in it, but it was just really beautifully illustrated, and I enjoyed the story, and it just followed the life of Josephine Baker, who was a famous dancer. The year is like slipping. I'm not remembering what year it was, but she originally tried to start dancing in the United States, and it just wasn't working out because she is a black woman and racism was a thing and still is a thing. So she went to Paris, France, and became famous, like super famous, and just became a world-renowned dancer. And it was pretty cool to see the pictures and just the way that the story kind of brought it all to life. And I really enjoyed that. I ended up giving this a 4 out of 5 stars, and I think this is a great book to add to your collection or pick up from the library if you have some kiddos, because the kiddos that I read it with loved it. The next book that I read was Born a Crime by Trevor Noah, and I actually listened to this on audiobook. But this was really good. I honestly was expecting this to be funny because Trevor Noah I find completely hilarious, which I understand he's on a Comedy Central show, so a lot of his stuff has to be like very comedy centric. But I was expecting this to also be very comedic, which there were moments where it was. But man, this went deep. This talked about a lot of racism, and it talked about apartheid in South Africa and how he grew up with a black mother and a white father, and him being biracial in South Africa during that time, and then the liberation with Nelson Mandela and just his life growing up in South Africa. It was really interesting. There are a lot of cultural norms that I wasn't aware of. I'll be honest, I don't know a lot about South Africa, so seeing that as a light introduction on some of the things that happened there, both good and bad, was really interesting. And I really enjoyed that Trevor Noah didn't ever demonize the culture. I think that's important, especially for an outsider like me looking in. It does no good for me to judge another culture's differences from the culture that I grew up in, because that's not going to change anything, and it's just kind of a crappy thing to do. So I enjoyed that from his perspective. It was just laying out the information and just telling it in a really engaging way. I ended up giving this a 4 out of 5 stars, and I highly recommend listening to the audiobook. It is narrated by Trevor Noah, and it was really, really fantastic. Next, I listened to Why Not Me by Mindy Kaling, obviously an audiobook because I listened to it, and I just really enjoyed this. I do really like Mindy Kaling. I think she's really funny. I loved her narrative on body positivity and just her life in Hollywood, and I like that she kind of jokes about like realness and how people think that just because she's accepting of her body and doesn't care what she wants to eat, then that's like realness. And she's just like, I don't know, I'm just being me, but I still like want to hold to a certain standard. I still want to be likable. I still want people to perceive me as beautiful. And it's like, all these things are so true. Like, you could totally be yourself and still want people to like you and still want people to care, and you still want people to enjoy how you present yourself, no matter how real you are. So I liked that discussion, and I'm not going to get off on a big tangent on this. Overall, I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars, and this is another audiobook that I recommend because Mindy Kaling narrates it, and I just love how she narrates things. It's so funny to me, and she is just very dramatic in just a relatable way, in my opinion, and I love it. Next is my one bad book, and I'm really disappointed. So I read The Whole Thing Together by Brashares, and this actually comes out this month. And I picked up an arc of it at Y'all Fest for the First in Line event that they had, and I was really excited because I absolutely love The Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants by Brashares. And I was hoping that I'd love this too, but this, number one, the story fell flat for me. Number two, I felt like there was some problematic stuff going on. So just to kind of throw it out there, there was a lot of problematic things in the representation. So there are characters of color and biracial characters, so they're Indian American characters, and just their descriptions felt problematic to me. They felt disrespectful and not well researched. In like the first couple of chapters of the book, you find out that the father of the kids in the story is he's from Bangladesh, and he was adopted by parents in Canada and then moved to the US. And the way that that his skin was described was his Indianness. And I just felt like that was totally inappropriate, and the descriptions for these characters just kind of fell on that line of it just didn't sit well with me, and I feel like if it didn't sit well with me, I'm like, then this must be problematic if I'm picking up on that, because, hello, I am a Caucasian female American. There's also an issue with body shaming and slut shaming that I found, and that was just super annoying. I hated Ray's point of view. I enjoyed the sister's point of view. I felt like those parts of the stories were engaging to me. But again, the story fell kind of flat. There were some problematic descriptions, and maybe it's not that problematic, but to me, I was just like, this doesn't seem okay. So overall, I gave this a 2 out of 5 stars. Like I said, there were some pieces of the story that I found engaging, but for me personally, I would pass on this book. If you want to read something by Brashares, The Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants is an amazing series, and I cannot recommend that enough. However, I will not recommend this book. And the last book that I read in March was Huntress by Malinda Lo, and this book, oh, it was so good. Like, how are more people not talking about this on BookTube? This is a standalone high fantasy. What? Like, I rarely see any standalone fantasies, and this one, I picked it up and I was like, this is amazing! And it follows these 2 main characters who are part of a school for sages, and one of them is very powerful and one of them is not, but she is highborn, so she was sent there because of connections, and they end up having to go to this fairy realm together to find out why their land is dying, because there's no sunlight, things aren't growing, monsters are coming out of the darkness and killing their people, and they have to go on this journey to figure out what is going on. And along the way, they are falling in love with each other, but there's like some angsty moments because they know that they can't, because they need to focus on this mission, and just everything about this book just came together so wonderfully. You know, you have the love interest, you have the creepiness of monsters and like this fairy realm, you have this high fantasy world, you have magic, and it's just like, why isn't this more popular on BookTube? Because it's like everything I love in a fantasy novel, but like combined into a standalone. And bonus points, there is another book in this world that is also a standalone, so if you really enjoy this world, as I did, you can go pick up Ash by Malinda Lo, which I'm going to. Overall, I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. It was really fantastic. The only thing is pacing is a little bit slower, kind of towards the middle, so I couldn't give it quite a full 5 stars, but it was still really good. And I do recommend picking this up if you love fantasy. I mean, there's nothing to lose. It's a standalone. It's not a commitment. You just read one book and you're done, and you'll be amazed. Anyway, that has been it for today's video. Overall, I had a really great reading month, and even though I didn't enjoy that one book, it's not like it was the end of the world. It's just one book out of, I think, like 27 or 28 that I've read so far this year. So overall, pretty good reading year so far. Only having one dud, not too bad. I will leave links in the down bar below for you guys to check out my other social media sites such as Goodreads, Instagram, and Twitter. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Stay weird. Say hi!
I just left Dad's house.
You're not gonna say hi?
I'm not.
It's gonna be in here and they're gonna be mad you didn't say hi to them.
Did not leave that in there.
You can't stop me. You have no power here.